Hello friend, and welcome to my experience with the pelvic floor physio. So let's start off by pointing out that I had no clue that this was even a thing. So maybe it's a little bit of a divine timing that it came up when it did, because once it came up from a couple different people. So hilarious that that happened. And pelvic floor being like its own complete little bubble of treatment that is like its whole own special world. So if you're thinking, I don't need a pelvic floor physio, I see a regular physio, or I get treatments for this, I get treatments for that. Trust me, I thought that until I saw the pelvic floor physio. Let's say word to the wise, because thankfully I had this come up through my rehab Pilates instructor, and who's happened to had 2 children and was pregnant again with a 3rd. And she was talking about how the issues that I seem to be experiencing with low back pain and stuff like that started to resemble a lot of what she was going through post her 2nd child and being pregnant with the 3rd. For the record, no, I'm not pregnant. I've never had any kids. However, stress and other like acute injuries or chronic injuries can cause the same, let's call them like issues and impact on that whole pelvic and pelvic floor area. And a lot of that pain can manifest as low back pain, and like low abdomen bloating. Keep in mind, I'm not a doctor, a little disclaimer, so listen to your doctors and your own practitioners. This is solely my opinion and my experience. Keep that in mind. So here we go, and she starts asking me all these questions. To get a little graphic, might use some words that you don't like. I apologize in advance, but let's be real here. So a couple things to note and keep in mind. Do you have a lot of low back pain? Do you have any pain when you are peeing or having bowel movements? Do you have issues holding in either of those? Do you have issues with and lots of pain with your periods or with sex or anything like that, like a lot of tightness and issues like, let's say, just getting anything up there? So a lot of that can be pelvic floor things. So that can be either your muscles being too tight, or your muscles being too loose, or your muscles engaging and not releasing. And that is, like I said, it's its own whole different world, and something that maybe just a normal practitioner doesn't have some of the resources for, right? Trust me, I've seen a lot of different practitioners, so there's not always a one-size-fits-all, one practitioner, one modality-fits-all kind of solution sometimes. And that's where this resource and toolkit is coming from, is sometimes you gotta try out couple different things, right? We're like Cinderella and the glass slipper. Sometimes you gotta try a couple little feet before you find the perfect one. So thankfully, also, I will say that I had the conversation with my Pilates instructor on what to expect when I went to the pelvic floor physio, because also when you start Googling it, because who doesn't still Google things, you might not get the most honest opinion on what happens. So another word to the wise, yes, your pelvic floor physio is going to ask you so many questions. Some of them might not seem relevant, so keep an open mind on what they're asking you, and really be thoughtful about injuries you've sustained, pain you have, when you think you might have it, maybe like tracking your cycle beforehand, and then thinking about all of those other things like bladder, bowel, sex, and all those kind of different things and how they affect you. So the intake appointment. That all happens in the intake appointment. You do like the questionnaire, you answer all the questions, and then is the fun part. So you thought that getting as a woman, getting a PAP was invasive. Well, just wait till you get that first pelvic floor examination. And she was in there, like in there, all the way up in there, checking things out. And I don't want that to discourage you from seeing a pelvic floor physio if you think you have any issues, because of course they are a professional, so it was very comfortable, and I thought it was very comfortable, and I also know how important it is to do it. So I didn't feel like I was being invaded and intruded and like I was some sort of science experiment. Just keep that in mind as well. But I just want you to know that yes, she will be in there and up there. And part of it, because myself personally has overactive muscles that don't release. So think of that whole, you know, you do the Kegels and you like squeeze, like if you had to pee and you like squeeze it off. Well, that's supposed to be kind of like an instant response, and you're supposed to squeeze and release. So my body doesn't release. And then there's also the whole thing about like, do you have a pelvic tilt? Do you have like a booty that sticks out? All that can play different factors. So again, not a one size fits all, my personal experience. It could be different for you. But yes, you do get an internal, for lack of better terms, vaginal massage. Like all the muscles and the walls and stuff surrounding need to know that it's okay to release. So yes, I was getting a massage right up in there. And honestly, I can say, again, it didn't feel intrusive. I didn't feel like a science experiment. And afterwards, it was magical. Like, I don't think I've ever, in the last year or so, had that kind of like release in that whole hip and pelvic, and like even, you know, like the low abdomen uterus pain you might get when you're bleeding in your cycle, or that really intense low back pain, or what I always associate as like pain in my hip flexor, or pain in my high hamstring, or anything like that. So one treatment, and that actually all released for me. I've been stretching since, so of course it's gonna be like hit and miss for everybody. However, that made a huge difference for me. But I also want to let you know that because you don't normally get an internal massage quite like that, you might be a little bit sore for a couple days. So, and it took me a day or two to clue into like why I was feeling the way that I was feeling, but I was like, man, my low abdomen is really, really sore, but I haven't really done, you know, I had to skip a Pilates because I was like, I don't know if I should be activating all these muscles. This is a little bit tender. And not quite a bloating feeling, because obviously a lot of it was like released and softened, but also really interesting for that too. And so it was probably a good week of me feeling really, really tender in that whole like lower abdomen area. So another thing to keep in mind, again, not discouraging you, I would highly recommend that anybody that has any of these issues that kind of can't be solved with, let's say like external manipulations, that a pelvic floor physio might be someone you want to see. The other interesting thing is, and this is also a divine timing thing that's kind of come up recently, is I ended up following the path of, was listening to a podcast and heard people start talking about PCOS. And since then, I bought a book on it, and then it started popping up on like a whole bunch of different podcasts I was listening to, and people started talking about it. And then I'm on a phone call with my godmother, and she says, oh, have you ever heard of endometriosis? Which, I mean, of course there's all these different things, but no, I've never really heard of it, because I feel personally like women's issues really aren't talked about or studied or maybe like commonplace, like the same with the pelvic floor physio, right? That's a very specific like woman thing. So I feel like they're not always, let's call them like mainstream health, right? So my godmother says this, and I, of course, again, start Googling it, and there's not a lot of information that comes up. However, there are some main things that I learn through the internet, and and I'm sharing this with you because it's a conversation I had with the pelvic floor physio, so it's still related to this, that if you as a teenager or whenever you started bleeding had a lot of pain or had a really heavy flow, or you know, that good old-fashioned like you were out for a day or two, or maybe you still are out for a day or two with like the hot water bottle just curled up in bed probably crying, there is a really good chance that you could also have endometriosis as well. I'm going to get tested for it. I don't really know exactly how they figure that out. So that'll be another topic for us for one day. However, it's apparently really, really common, like 1 in 10 women, and it takes like years to diagnose because basically as a young adult, you have all these issues. In most cases, the healthcare system, in Canada at least, is you get put on birth control, and that kind of masks the pain. And then you get a little bit older and maybe the pain starts to come back. But you think, oh, it's just because I'm older, it's just because I have all these other pains, my low back pain, for me, you know, the mystery pain, and it's all part of that. And then my godmother mentions it, and something in my head was just like, oh my gosh, like a switch flips, right? And then I go and see this pelvic floor physio, and she asks me the same question. She goes, do you have endometriosis? And I was like, really funny that you said that. I have no idea. But she goes, you know, you have like, she said like an endo belly, which apparently it's just the way that my abdomen sits, and a little bit of the inflammation that sits in it is really commonplace with endometriosis. Again, not a doctor, not 100% sure exactly what it is, but as she explained to me, it is the tissues that would normally build up inside your uterus are actually building up on the outside. And so they also build up, shed, obviously have nowhere to go because they're not inside of that like canal with the egress. They're literally still in your body. So this can cause scarring, this can cause inflammation. I saw online people do like surgery for it. Also, of course, then I start doing like endometriosis, holistic care, natural care, all those things. And of course, there's just stretching for it. There's like herbal remedies for it. There's a whole bunch of different options. So again, this will be a different topic, but keep in mind, it is always something that you can ask about. You can also get an ultrasound for it if you ask your doctor. So she mentions that. Apparently it's very common. Apparently I show some signs and symptoms. Something else I'm looking into. But back to just the generic pain thing. Again, if you feel like you have a lot of low back pain that you can't really maybe like place in your head, you know, you haven't had a big fall, you haven't had any sort of traumatic injuries to that area, I also see the RMTs, I see an osteopath, I see a physio, and I see a chiropractor. So while I've slowly gotten better, I'm not fully healed. So I'm always looking for alternate avenues of healing and to look at different things as well. So if you are taking, you've already kind of, you know, you've gone from seeing your doctor and you're in these more mainstream alternative healthcare, let's call it, which is, you know, your like massages, your chiros, your osteos, anything that people are still kind of like, well, why don't you just go to the doctor? If you would like to add something different and try something different that might help expedite your healing or recovery process, I would highly recommend a pelvic floor physio. If you have a lot of trauma around those areas of your body, I would also maybe recommend that you do some healing work prior to that, whether that is a counselor, psychiatrist, therapist, spiritual coach, meditation, whatever you feel like you need, because again, as I said, she's gonna be up there, and I want you to be okay with that because I want you to get the most out of what this can offer. So, takeaways, amazing experience, words the wise, you are definitely going to find you are being massaged professionally in places you maybe didn't think was possible. And sometimes you just gotta be okay with that. So that's all I have for you. If you have any questions, you are always welcome to reach out to me. All of our contact information is down below, so you can comment there. You can send us an email. You can reach out however you feel comfortable. If you want to know when there's more videos, you can subscribe on the old YouTube, or you can also subscribe to the journal, which is where I am sharing all of this journey, and you're welcome to join us. I would be happy to save you some time and some pain and help you on your healing journey as well, because I think that a little bit of that sharing and healing and love can really help elevate us in our experience. So have a lovely day, and check back for our next video in the series. Bye.